welcome back to another episode of Observations for Our Time. I am Yahowah. We're here with Scott and Kirk. How are you guys?
Good. Terrific. Thank you.
I'm really good. Yeah, it's my favorite day of the week. So.
Yeah, we have two programs today. We'll follow up this one with our Shabbat program, 7:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific Time on Yahowah Radio. But now we're going to return to Proverbs 6. We had covered, I think, up to about 11 or 12, the statements 11 and 12 in our last program. But let's kind of retrace our ground steps with the most logical starting point here, which would be Proverbs 6:9. And to put this all in perspective, we have considered two long chapters of material where Yahowah and Samuel 1, 1 Samuel 7, I think the third verse, lays out his case against religion. And we then trace down the foes that were listed in that statement. The Philistine and the Astartes, the Queen of Heavens and Mother of God, and looked at what God had to say about these two villains elsewhere in his testimony, and came to understand his animosity towards religion and politics. And then in 1 Samuel 8, we covered God's thesis against government and why he says we ought not align ourselves with human governance because it is wholly counterproductive and consistently working against our interests. But we got into all of this based upon a proverb that we had reviewed briefly prior to doing a more comprehensive review of it, which is a proverb from a father to a son. The father in this case happens to be Yahowah, our Heavenly Father. The son is anyone who is part of the covenant or is interested in becoming part of the covenant. And it begins by the father telling the son that if you've ever made a pledge, given an oath to any adversarial institution, which would be any government or religious or military institution, then you need to cease and desist, separate yourself from them, confront them, and explain to them why you are no longer allied with them. And then God goes on to explain his overt animosity towards these things. And then he then tells us that our apathy, ignorance, if you will, is bliss. That the excuse, I just didn't know, if you only told me, it's not fair, I was misled, that's going to fly as well as a lead balloon. This is the question that is a rhetoric question that God asks. For how long and to what extent? Inactive, apathetic, and lethargic one? Will you just lie there and remain inactive? When and what will it take for you to arise and stand up from your altered state of awareness, from your slumber, from being unaware and unresponsive? That's really not a question that I would want God asking of me.
No, not at all. I know this is a little early in our discussion to throw something in, but I found some really neat stuff. Did you know the word you just said about being relaxed, rest, and sleep, shakab? Mm-hmm. When you go back to the root, you know what it also means? It means to rest or sleep or lay down for copulation. And when you add that in with sleeping with Babel, the comments he's been making prior to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whore of Babylon. Yeah,
the whore of Babylon.
Sleeping with the whore. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So it's
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing the inferences in the word that suggest that it could be and was sometimes used to speak of sleeping with someone for the purpose of conceiving a child, or at least sleeping with them for the purpose of having sex, if you will.
Well,
And it did not resonate with me, because I at the time wasn't when I translated, wasn't thinking of how adroitly we were going to be confronted with a whore. And yet it's this proverb that introduces us specifically to the whore. It's why most English commentaries on this passage say that this is a proverb on adultery. And yet it has nothing to do with sex.
No.
So I just immediately discounted the sleeping with for the purpose of sex, whether it be in prostitution or marriage, from this, just because of the fact that I really wanted to distance what we were studying from this notion that this proverb was about adultery. But you are correct, because the proverb, well, this is not about adultery in the sense of having an illicit affair as a married individual. This is about adultery in the spiritual sense, and breaching the covenant, which is a marriage vow, and having relations with the adversary. And this adversary here is depicted as the whore of Babylon. So the one who prostitutes herself in the guise of religion. So it is, and that is a valid insight into the word. No question about it.
These whole passages are so filled with this, having gone back the second time, because we did do a lot of this one time on the show, on the previous show, and I couldn't believe it. Honest to goodness, I couldn't believe so many of these things are in there as well, that as long as you have the context, like I was telling Scott, as long as you have the context of who we're talking about and what we're talking about, then they just blow you away. I wish I really spoke ancient Hebrew.
One of the reasons that I would not want God to ask me this question, how long are you going to stay ignorant and unaware, unresponsive? And that's really the thing. How long are you going to stay unaware and unresponsive? Is because God has gone to great lengths to provide us information that would make anyone who is observant aware. And he is so clear about what he is offering, and what he is offering is so beneficial for us, costing us so little and gaining us so much, that it is, to be unresponsive is just stunningly wasteful of one's soul. And so for God to be asking this question, the person has to willfully and knowingly choose
to do nothing,
to ignore his Torah guidance.
Yeah, because what did he ever ask us that was so hard other than Shamar Torah, and then make a decision?
Right. Read my instructions, read my guidance, study it, come to understand what I'm offering, come to know who I am by Shamar, observing my Torah instructions, and then if you like who I am, if you think you'd enjoy spending time with me, if you view the offer as beneficial, then by all means respond. Engage in a relationship. That's really all he's asking of us, is to step away from those who are misleading us, those in religion and politics and other human institutions, to step away from them long enough to recognize that they're not providing a viable answer, that they're actually doing nothing but offering false hope, and that there really is an offer out there. There really is a God worth knowing, and that it is in all of our interest to take some time out of our lives to get to know Him, to decide whether or not we like Him, because He bears no resemblance to the religious God. If you like the religious God, you're going to hate the real God. If you hate the religious God, chances are you'll like the real one. But if you don't know him, then, why in the world are you asking him to save you? Why are you asking him to spend eternity with you if you don't even know him? And if you're clueless as to what he's asking, what he's offering, why are you praying to him?
Valid point.
Yeah. So it's a rhetorical question. He says, for how long? And to what extent? Inactive, apathetic, and lethargic one? Will you just lie there and remain inactive? Will you ever arise and stand up? What will it take for you to arise and stand up from your being unaware and unresponsive? And that is another one of those things that is constantly before us. I just started writing the 4th chapter of Observations for Our Time, and I'm taking the approach here of, because I'm covering the 91st Psalm, which was my first real set of instructions and guidance from God, a God that I didn't even know at the time. And so I decided I'm going to lay out the set of circumstances that came to exist for this psalm to be so meaningful. It's the psalm that launched 3 million words in all of the books, 5,000 radio shows, 3 million words, are all directly initiated by this psalm. So I told the story. This is what God asked, how he asked it, what I said in return, and how that all led to the psalm. And I am constantly reminded by people who said, well, there's no way that I'm going to trust a God that I can't see. That unless God were to speak to me, then I don't really care to know him. Well,
Yes.
I think the reason that this God chose to speak to me, certainly wasn't because I was qualified. I didn't win any prize. It wasn't because I had something special to offer. It's that I think there's only two things. One is he knew that I was just about the only person out there who was willing to do what he wanted done. And second, he knew because he exists outside of our 3.5 dimensions, stuck in time as we are, he could see into the future in our 3.5 dimensions and recognized that ultimately I was going to respond. I was going to take the time to get to know him. I would go where the words lead, even if they destroy everything that I held true. And that's really where you've got to be.
Well,
You've got to be willing.
To be the case, yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Are you willing to go where the words lead? Are you willing to invest the time to be observant? Do you want to get to know him? Are you going to have fun with him? Are you going to enjoy his company? Or not? And so God is pleading with those he has created for us to wake up, and to get to know what he is like and what he is offering. And this question of what will it take for you to do so? Well, for me, it was that one request: will you do this? Will you do this for me? And that we engaged in a dialogue. But the vast majority of people, he's not going to do that for. And the reason he's not going to do that for, their mindset is that they're not going to be bothered.
No.
And if bothered enough to listen and to engage in a discussion, they are not going to go where the words lead if those words call them to be
your lifestyle.
Right, to reject patriotism and nationalism and politics and religion and all of those kind of things. They aren't going to go there. Too uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to see God, all you have to do is observe his Torah. Right there. He is more visible in his Torah, more clearly recognizable in his Torah, than he was when he led the children of Israel out of Egypt, or when he walked in the dusty lanes of Jerusalem in year 4,000, 33 CE. More recognizable, more obvious, more clearly visible, easier to know. Right there in the words of the Torah.
Yeah. Can I
in fact, the Torah represents him. Yeah, I was just going to say the Torah represents him far better than did the fire on the top of the mountain, or did the flesh that was on the skeleton of the individual body that represented the sacrificial lamb. These words are as close to a perfect representation of him as there is. And in these words, you down into his mindset. He's frustrated with people, saying, what will it take for you to shed your ignorance, for you to care enough to no longer be unaware?
Well, this has been the first time that I had done a lot of personal translating many months ago, or several months ago, and then had revisited it and redid it because I couldn't find my notes, so I just redid it. And later I did find my notes, and I found, my gosh, there is so much left on the bone, so much meat on the bone I never even got to. It's amazing, because a lot of times you'll say, not only, obviously it's great fun to do this, but it's also, you always say, when I went back and retranslated something the second time without assuming this is what it means completely,
right?
And then you dig it up and you dig and you dig and you dig and you look at all, and I have a few more sources perhaps than I did before too, but you go through it and you go, my gosh, I missed that completely. And it's just so thrilling.
It's been a case of every time that I've edited any of these books, and I think Yahowah, for example, has been edited either 7 or 8 times. And if I were to edit it now, and the reason I edited it is I'd learned something that caused me to have to go back and make a lot of corrections. Like when I first wrote it, I thought there was something called a renewed covenant. I knew there was no New Testament, but I thought there was a renewed covenant. And come to find out, there is no such thing as a renewed covenant. The covenant will be renewed. It has not been renewed now, so the past tense renewed covenant, that doesn't exist. And therefore, the text of what's called the New Testament cannot be valid. So I had to go back and I had to rewrite a bunch of things based upon learning that.
I recall I had to reprint them.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but that was just the case. But I will tell you
that's all right.
that if I were to go back and retranslate every passage, and that which is like 3,500 pages worth of material, 7 volumes of Yahowah, there isn't a single passage that would remain the same. Because you're constantly learning, you're constantly seeing new insights. This is a voyage of discovery. And so, you go through it, and the more time you spend, the more you learn. And the more times you go back, the more you see. It's all about how closely are you willing to examine the words, how carefully are you willing to consider them. But if you're not, if you're satisfied with never reading, and I would say that my youngest son spent 2 years at a Christian college, and they required him to take classes on the New and Old Testament from their perspective. And that New Testament, of course, he did miserably in those because he knew that it was a farce, and was really challenging to his professor, who actually was a significant player in the New Living Translation, which is absolute rubbish. And as he went into his quote-unquote Old Testament class, that professor was even worse. And he was a Calvinist, predestination, no free will, that sort of thing. And one of the things that occurred is the professor says, okay, how many of you have read the first 5 books of the Bible? Only one hand went up. My sons.
Really?
Yeah. Here's a Christian college. None of them had read them. So if you're not willing to read them, you aren't going to get anywhere. And I'm going to tell you that if you're satisfied with merely reading them in a religious publication, New American Standard, the New Living Translation, the King James or New King James, the NIV, if you're satisfied with just reading them in one of those religious publications, you're going to be better off than the person who has not read it, but you're maybe going to know 1/1,000,000th of 1% of what God said.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be cluttered with a great many things he did not say.
Yeah.
Pretty low correlation.
All that you can't. Yeah.
Yeah, really a low correlation between the words that Yahowah conveyed and the language that he conveyed them and the translations promoted by these religious institutions. Really an extraordinarily low correlation. So this is why he's saying what follows. A little inactivity leads to laziness, to folding one's hands together in a lethargic manner to rest. And here this rest, shakab, is the same word that means that it leads to having an affair with the whore.
Mm-hmm.
This whore of Babylon, the confusion and corruption of religion. So the fact is that if you're lazy and you're not willing to dig in, if you're not willing to scratch beneath the surface, if you're not willing to think about this, if you're not willing to make connections, if it's such a low priority to you that you're not going to invest the time, then you're never going to know God.
You could just ask the question, if you've got a folded up hand to God, what can you accomplish? You're not going to, that's nothing. So you can't even open a tent door.
Right. If your hands are folded, you're not
you're not doing anything.
Unfurling, if you were the scroll, the scroll of the Torah. You're even today, we're not working with scrolls. We work online. Typically, we work on our computers. And I have a Word document, and then I have a fairly powerful search engine related to the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms. I use Logos software. And, the difference between it and all the hardback books I have is that it'll bring up any number of interlinears. I usually have 2 open all the time. And then each word in the interlinear is then presented with up to 12 different lexicons. And each word has the stem, the mood, the conjugation, the voice of the verb is all presented. And it's clear about first, second, third person, masculine, feminine, singular, plural, all of those kinds of grammatical things that help a person understand. Yeah, it's all laid out there. And as well as when you go to any one of these lexicons, you can look at all of the words that are written similarly prior to the Masoretic vocalization. And then you can look at, if it's a noun, you can look at the actionable root of the word, which is typically the verbal root, and come to have an appreciation of the core meaning of that word. And you can also look at the way the letters are drawn to appreciate what's being conveyed.
Sure.
But that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, but yes.
You don't do it quickly. And you really got to want to do this. You've got to really enjoy doing this. It's got to be more interesting to you than watching television, for example, or playing a video game, for example. It's got to be a priority to you, or chances are you're going to be like this person here, that a little inactivity breeds laziness to folding one's hands together in a lethargic manner. It is something that we witness a lot in society, where generations of people, particularly in inner cities, have been conditioned not to work. Their parents didn't work. They don't work. Their children won't work. And one of the things that I noticed in business was that if you want something done, you give it to the busiest person. Hey, that sounds counterintuitive. You'd say if you want something done, give it to the person that's idle. No, the problem is with a person that's prone to idleness never gets started. They never get going. They got all the time in the world, they just don't use it. And the person that's busy, that's active, they just
Put it in there somewhere.
fit it in there. They know how to get it done. They engage. They make it happen. I remember when I was at some of the most challenging times of my business life, and I would begin each day with a long list of things that needed to be done, and add to it the things that didn't get done the previous day. And what I tried to do was whatever the thing was that I wanted to do the least, that's where I started.
Mm-hmm.
I get that sucker done and out of the way so they never look at it anymore.
Yeah, good idea.
And yeah, just kept on plugging through it and crossing things off. There was a satisfaction when you cross something off the list and you reduced its length. But that really is the reason, I think, more than anything else, that we're in this place that we have come to, is that we enjoy doing the work. We enjoy engaging in the process of shedding our ignorance, of coming to become more aware of who God is and what He's offering.
Yes.
Why we do this program.
Really understand something.
I agree. So then this next line is really close to where we were previously, and it says, "For He will come, walking and behaving like a leader or guide, taking control, and you will lack what's needed, and have a scarcity of something absolutely vital, needing what you do not have, causing you to be bereaved and to be diminished." Now, for the remaining part of this proverb, which goes on now, this is the 11th verse, I think it goes on to 35 or 36.
Right.
God's going to be addressing a singular individual.
Uh-huh.
This is it. For He will come. Masculine, singular. For He. It's not saying for they will come.
No, a person.
No. Yeah. For He will come. Singular.
Mm-hmm.
Masculine. Walking and behaving like a leader or guide, taking control. The verb, written. And the third person, masculine, singular.
Right.
And you will lack what is needed. Now, the reason that that's important is that it behooves us, if we want to understand, to process who might be, to consider who might it be that God is talking about. This was written, and chances are by Dode. We don't really have authorship of the Proverbs. The reason we don't have authorships of the Proverbs is because there isn't any merit in us knowing who jotted them down.
Mm-hmm.
So long as Yahweh's name is used in a manner in the testimony is consistent with His overall witness, and there is something in it that is prophetic that we can use to demonstrate that God authored it, then it doesn't matter whose human hands held the writing implement. But we do know that these things were written right around the time of Dode, David, which was approximately 1000 BCE. So we're looking for an individual that will meet all of these criterion after 1000 BCE. Now, what we're also looking for is, he's just talked about apathy. And so we now know that this individual, you can thwart their designs. You can minimize their threat to the potential to mislead you by not being apathetic, by shedding your ignorance. The more you know, the less prone to being misled you're going to be.
Cannot be vulnerable at all, no.
Right. So, and as we move forward through this, and he gets very explicit about this individual,
Mm-hmm.
what we will learn is that the antidote, the specific antidote, the thing that you need to know to avoid being misled, is the Torah and its mizmor. It's our mitzvah. It's terms and conditions associated with the relationship. That if you know those things, if you are keenly aware of them, that this individual cannot mislead you. So God's going to say that this individual is going to distort the Torah in such a way that if you are not aware of the Torah, if you're unaware of the Torah and ignorant of it,
how would you know?
Then you're going to be taken advantage of.
Sure.
So that is an enormously important clue. So this person is going to come walking and behaving like a leader or guide, taking control, and you will lack what is needed and have a scarcity of something absolutely vital. So a fellow is going to arrive, an individual, and he's going to be a person who's very travels, because the verb here is halak, which means to walk, it means to travel, to journey. So this individual, he is going to be best known for his travels. And he is going to claim to be a guide. And then this individual now is going to take advantage of those who lack what is needed. That those who have a scarcity of something absolutely vital, causing them to be bereaved and diminished to nothingness. As we move forward here, we're going to, because God's going to use this travel again concept, we're going to consider the travels of Paul, who was the only one that of all the people who could have been at this point considered for mass deception. Because if God's going to say, I'm 1000 BC, I'm giving you a prophecy about one person who is going to do a lot of traveling, and that they're going to bereave those who are unaware, specifically of his Torah. There's only one of the potential candidates amongst the likes of, for example, Rabbi Akiba and Muhammad and Paul, who would fit this bill, that are known for the travels. And that's Paul.
Right.
And
it becomes real clear.
Now I will tell you that knowing the Torah would not prepare you to necessarily reject Rabbi Akiba, because Rabbi Akiba based everything that he had to say on the Torah. In fact, his Talmud are arguments before and against and regarding the Torah. He doesn't reject the Torah. He just interprets the Torah to the liking of his religion, rabbinic Judaism. But in the case of Muhammad, what he says is so utterly stupid that if you're a Muslim, you could be almost wholly ignorant as a Muslim and recognize, now this is ridiculous. This guy is parading around. Yeah, he's a terrorist. He's a mass murderer. He's a pedophile. He's a rapist. His diatribe is immoral. It's disjointed. He claims that the sun goes to bed in a muddy spring at night. He claims that the two-horned one, which is Alexander the Great, was a Muslim, and that he went to preach to extraterrestrials that reside in the muddy spring where the sun goes nighty-night. I mean, you don't have to know the Torah to know. No, that's stupid. But the one person who will fool you, if you don't know the Torah, is Paul.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other candidate. We've only had one statement here, and I don't think there's any other candidate.
Well, just the travel alone disqualifies just about everybody.
Yes. Now, it goes on to say, a confusing and incorrect man. Masculine, singular. This is Adam, person. Individual human being, a singular male. An unjust, dishonest, evil, and vain individual. Ish. Person. Singular, masculine. Once again, a lone individual. travels about halak with speeches which are wrong, false, crooked, perverting, and corrupting. Well, if there was any other candidate, we're 2 statements in. We've got another 23 to go. And we've narrowed it down to a singular individual, at least if you're going to be reasonable and rational about this.
Well, just to toss one in, just to sweeten the pot a little bit on Equesh, or Equeshuth, or is from Aquash.
And Quashoth, right.
Yeah, Quashoth, okay.
Which was, I translated it, which are wrong, false, crooked, perverting, and corrupting. And so this person's speeches, the words spoken out of his mouth are
now here's what
wrong, false, crooked, perverting, and corrupting.
Right, and that's good. It gets even more interesting because the root is to twist, to declare me guilty, and pervert. Now, the reason pervert is important is because, as those of us who have read Question and Paul and have then gone back and checked it, he declares himself a pervert. He's by any stretch of the imagination. So,
yeah, he does.
Now we narrow it down
Paul.
once again, you can't get Paul out of this if you wanted to.
No. Now, I'm going to address the pervert accusation that you've just leveled against Paul, and then we're going to talk about his travels.
Okay.
Paul wrote the most ridiculous, the most utterly insane bit of oratory in Romans 7 that I probably have ever read. And that's saying a lot, because his ode to government in Romans 13, where he says that all governments are for good, that they're established from God, they only use the sword for good, you should submit to them. You know, recognizing that governments have been against governments and have raised the sword against other people, and that the world has been at war with everyone, and it currently is at war. I mean, if you think that this is of your government, then since it's at all governments, then what is it about the Islamic State that you think is good? You know, how is it possible that the Greek government and the Roman government could both be good when they were warring against each other, and both appointed by God when they were killing one another? How could you think that the government of Nazi Germany was good and of God? Because he says the only authority comes from God, so all governments are from God. But Nazi Germany, that government was good.
That's from God, man.
So you know, Romans 13 is pretty insane, right on the face of it. But Romans 7 is the dumbest thing anybody ever wrote that is at least considered to be a sane individual. And what Romans 7 basically says is that a woman is freed of the obligation of the Torah in the same way she is freed by the death of her husband. That when the husband died, she is freed from the Torah of her husband. Now, there is no Torah of the husband. And a woman is not enslaved or captive in any way to her husband, even when she is married to him. And so the freedom, the whole premise is stupid. But what Paul goes on to say is he says that the Torah is what made me a sexual pervert. He says, I wouldn't even have known what a sexual pervert was if it wasn't for the Torah. So it's the Torah that made me a pervert. Yeah. That's like saying that the red light at the intersection is what made me hit the accelerator, which is why I plowed into that car and killed everybody in it. You know, that's like saying that the code of conduct that is in within any organization's operating procedures is what causes you to violate it. But anyway, Paul claims that he says, I am a sexual pervert because the Torah made me a sexual pervert.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, of course, is the Torah doesn't have much to say about sex.
Well,
You know, this whole fixation, the whole fixation with being Victorian in the sense of don't be showing those breasts if you're a girl. Don't be wearing a short skirt now. Don't you be flirting. Don't you be having, romantic relations with some boy or girl out there. And, the Christians say that, that it's Christian morality. Well, I'm telling you, God has very little to say about sex. I mean, he says, I don't like it when guys sleep with guys, girls sleep with girls. I don't like it when boys sleep with their mothers. I don't like it when the brothers and sisters sleep together. I don't like it when you attempt to have sex with animals. There's some things that I want to tell you that are not healthy. Yeah, you ought not do those things.
Ain't good for you.
Yeah, but I don't think he ever says, you ought not kiss that pretty girl that you're on a date with. So, Paul claimed to be a pervert. But and there's not a whole lot of people claiming to speak for God. That in their foundation, Galatians is Paul's foundational letter, but the religion of Christianity is really based on Romans.
Absolutely.
It's Paul's ultimate treatise.
It's a masterpiece is what they call it.
Paul's masterpiece on Christianity. It's the basis of the Christian church. And in the 7th chapter, he admits to being a sexual pervert. So, that's a pretty good clue that this person is going to be that this person's words is going to reveal them a pervert.
Well, it's not that somebody couldn't be a pervert. It's the fact that he pointed it out. I mean, he identified himself.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I don't think that is the actual intent in the sense of we think of a sexual pervert as what Paul was admitting to. To pervert is as a verb. This is a verb. Oh, and actually, this is actually being used as a noun. So I guess maybe it is reasonable. But to pervert as a verb is to corrupt, to alter, to change in such a way that what was there is no longer considered valid, which is precisely what Paul did to the Torah. In fact, he called what he would dismiss as the old system, which is now called the Old Testament, he would dismiss it as pornography. And in Galatians, in fact, very early in Galatians, first chapter, he calls that Yahowah's Torah, prophets, and Psalms, the old system, pornography, poneros in the Greek. So that's the kind of perversion we're talking about here with this word, but the word does form the basis of what is considered a perversion of normal sexuality. For example, bestiality, incest, homosexuality are a perversion of the normal, healthy function of sexuality.
Right.
Okay. That being the case, let's talk about Paul's travels. Now, this man's message, clearly, Paul's message, would be confusing, incorrect, mystifying, and baffling, deceitful, and destructive. Yahowah is alerting us to the arrival of an individual, however, who would be best known for his travels. There's only one man who claimed to speak on behalf of the God of Abraham, who traveled extensively. Now, there's some people God hated, like Hadrian. God hates Hadrian. I mean, I can't wait to be at Hadrian's trial. And he traveled extensively. But Hadrian never claimed to speak for the God of Israel. He wanted to obliterate all references to the God of Israel. So there's only one who claimed to speak for him. That would be Paul, who traveled extensively. He was confronted and opposed in Jerusalem, in Yahowah, by the disciple Shimon Kefish. He was in Amphipolis, in Apollina, and in Philippi, in Macedonia. He was in Antioch and Damascus, Syria. He was in Antipatris en route to Caesarea, both in Greece. He was at the Appii Forum along the Appian Way in Rome. Assos in Mysia, as well as in Athens, Greece. Paul's long walk through the Gentile world took him to Attalia and Pamphylia, Berea, which lies west of Thessalonica, a city whose inhabitants Paul wrote 2 very hostile letters. And speaking of expressing hostility, Paul wrote 2 additional letters to the residences of Corinth along the Isthmus of Greece, because they, like the Thessalonians and the Galatians, immediately rejected Paul's message. He would sail to Paphos and Salamis on the island of Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean, and then walk through Derbe and Troas in Asia Minor, both multiple times. But it was in Ephesus where he demonstrated his opposition to the disciple Yahowah, commonly known as John, which is what really caused him to be condemned by Yahusha in Revelation. Paul's journey through history took him to fair havens on the island of Crete, Iconium and Lystra, both in today's Turkey. He was, of course, born and raised in Tarsus. His travels took him to Malta, an island off the coast of Rome, to Mytilene on the island of Lesbos, to Mytilus in Asia Minor, Myra and Patera in Lycia, Neapolis in Philippi, Perga in Pamphylia, and to Puteoli on the Gulf of Naples outside of Rome, in addition to Rhegium. And speaking of Rome, prior to the popes, Paul was the only man to claim on behalf of the God of Israel that he was doing so in the city of Rome, in the very heart of the beast. He was also in the Phoenician cities of Sidon and Tyre, in addition to Syracuse on the coast of Sicily. Now, considering the fact that all of this is documented throughout Acts, because of the words Paul spoke and wrote in these places, it's obvious why Yahowah identified this man based upon his halak travels.
I have a book that lays out some very strong research on while he was in Rome, supposedly being captive. He wasn't captive or imprisoned, and he actually made it all the way to England from Spain, as well as there through Brittany, which would, to me, would say something about what he's doing is marking all his territory. And his,
yes, like a dog.
Those places, and in particular the England, which became, the Roman Empire, the English Empire, likened to the Roman Empire, and then on to us. Well, it makes perfect sense if that's true. But
I'm convinced that the things that are absolutely known is that the people that Paul spoke to in Galatians and Thessalonica and in Corinth rejected him. And we know this because Paul's letters to each of those communities demeans those he spoke to. And he says, how in the world could you have changed so quickly after I left? What's wrong with you people? You are morons for having rejected my testimony. And, to hell with you. And so we know that those who heard him rejected him. We also know that when he went into Jerusalem for the Jerusalem summit with the disciples, that Shimon Kefish, Peter, cut him up and spit him out. They called him a liar. And we know that he was ruthless against Yahowah in his testimony and condemned Shimon Kefish. So we know that he was in direct opposition to Yahusha's disciples. We know that he only quoted Yahusha once, and the time that he quoted him, he misquoted him, got him wrong. And that's in all 13 letters. Only one citation, and the one citation he got wrong. So we know a fair amount about the nature of this guy, and we know that he viewed the message of the disciples as being so wrong as to be condemning, and that in his letters to Timothy, he says, we need to go in there and tear them away from that message and make sure they reject that message, and we start all over that message. And then we know in his last letter to Timothy, he said, it's all over. I'm all alone. Everyone has rejected me. It's likely at that point that he was in Rome, but it is extraordinarily unlikely that he was in a Roman prison. He wrote on behalf of Rome. He took on a Roman name. He was a Roman citizen. He didn't do anything that Rome would have opposed.
No, not at all.
So no, it's highly unlikely. And
you only point out how much of a liar it is to everything.
The Romans were meticulous historians. Now, I want to tell you that somewhere, and particularly at this phase, Roman history was meticulously chronicled. Roman history becomes a blur once Christianity takes hold, because the historians are about as honest as the church itself, and they recast history to serve their interests, like the whole Christian period of torture and of being burnt by Nero on posts to light his gardens. It's all rubbish. The Constantinian conversion to Christianity and seeing the cross burning in front of the sun and hearing under this sign conquer never happened. It's all Christian religious myth with people pretending to be historians. So it is hard at this point, when there is no contemporaneous writing as to where Paul went, because at this point, Paul was a nobody. He was wholly rejected. Had it not been for Marcion recognizing the Gnosticism in Paul's letters and resonating with that, and then making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of Paul's letters, and forming a New Testament based upon Paul's letters, we would never have heard of him. I think he just faded into oblivion. Now, you say that you think he went to
it's pretty
Britain.
Compelling. It's pretty compelling that he at least made he made the trip, so didn't seem to stand still. He, once again, like most preachers, get out of town and go to the next place. But,
that's right. Yeah, you got caught with your hand in the till.
I just thought it was interesting that if that's true, because we've certainly adopted so much of Pauline lifestyle. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever he goes, he touches.
So let's go back and because now we're dealing with a single man again. It's being reemphasized, and then we will continue, because this is all a continued sentence. So this individual, God says of him, a confusing and incorrect man, an Adam, a singular person, an unjust, dishonest, evil, and vain, egotistical, deceitful, invalid, and unreliable, false, harmful, relationally damaging, untrue and fraudulent, religious and troublesome individual, singular, again, masculine, a lone individual, travels about, actually walks, literally going through life, with speeches, words of his mouth, which are wrong, false, crooked, perverting and corrupting, which are wickedly distorting and misrepresent the meaning of something important, twisting it, misapplying it, corrupting it with distortions, using circuitous and serpentine reasoning. Now, before we continue with this, I would tell you that the thing that finally alerted me to the fact we had a real snake on our hands with Paul was in Galatians, as he starts his attack on the Torah. His first citation is from Chabauk, where he claims that the Torah cannot saved because we live by faith. And the passage that he's quoting, he not only pulls out of context, but he only quotes a small part of the sentence. He doesn't even quote the full sentence, and he doesn't translate it correctly from Hebrew into Greek. And where God is saying that the only solution to man's ills is to know and rely upon his Torah, Paul, by pulling it out of context, shortening it so that the full sentence isn't even there, and then misrepresenting what was said, conveyed the opposite of what God had said in his Torah. Paul's message does exactly what this says, and he does it every single time. Every time he quotes something from the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, it's always the same. Always out of context, always truncated, always misrepresented, and he always uses his resultant bastardization to try to prove a point that's the opposite of what God is saying.
So it's taken 2,000 years for somebody to stand up and say, you know, this guy's a liar, and nobody beyond, and it's unequivocal?
Well, you know, 1,000 years before he wrote the first word, God stood up and said,
well, God did, yeah.
This man's a liar. Yeah, this man's a liar. Yeah, this man's a liar. He's a fraud. This is the technique that he's going to use. And if you're not aware of my Torah, he's going to fool you. Moving on, we read, with a sinister winking of the eyes, he subtly signals the vacillating nature of his proclamations by shifting about regarding circumcision with his stance, all while casting aspersions with his fingers. Okay, well, what do you think that Yahowah is referring to when he talks about a sinister winking, a karatz? You know, when I was in business, no matter what business I was in, as the founder of that business, I was the person most responsible for selling what the business had to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in business as a sales and marketing guy.
Yeah.
And so I learned really quickly when I'm making a presentation to read the buyer, to read the audience. And I could tell when the audience was with me, when the audience couldn't wait for me to finish and be done with me. And you know early on, you never have to, you can read people, you never have to ask the question. You never have to ask for the order. And I also got to the point where in business, you're constantly forming partnerships with various people to get things done. And you also look at their eyes as they're talking to you. Most people, you know, look at the mouth so that they're trying to use its position to help them understand the words that are being said. But I always felt you could learn the most, better understand the speaker if you looked at their eyes. They can't look you back in the eye. If they can't hold a glaze, if their eyes are winking, if you will, unable to focus on you, they aren't telling you the truth. It's really hard to look somebody in the eye and lie to them. That's why even in the people who are expert now at looking at facial expressions, they always look to the eyes. Now, Paul once wrote, and I believe it was in Corinthians, that he would pretend to be what he wasn't to take advantage of people. He said, you know, if it's a Jewish audience, I'll pretend to be Jewish. If it's a Gentile audience, I'll pretend to be Gentile. If the audience is Torah observant, I'll pretend to be Torah observant even though I'm not. If it's not Torah observant, then I'm not Torah observant. I'll be whatever I need to be to take advantage of people. Well, that's a sinister winking right there. As much as it gets. Now, this next statement is, of course, one of those that just go, oh my goodness. It is almost always just translated that he shuffles his feet, because regel can be feet. It also means stance. And so they just leave malal as shuffling. But you know, that's not malal's primary meaning. If you look up malal, you'll see that number 1, first definition of malal is circumcision.
Yeah.
And so he subtly signals the vacillating nature of his proclamations by shuffling about regarding circumcision. Whoa.
That a killer.